in my previous NECA Planet of the Apes video, I looked at the 8-inch NECA figures, and I talked a little bit about the different lines that NECA produced for Planet of the Apes. So today I thought I'd take an overview of the 7-inch scale figures. Now, this line dedicated to the original film was fairly short-lived. It just ran for 2 series. And whilst they managed to knock out virtually all the major ape characters from the film, sadly they didn't release any of the human characters, including Taylor. I'm not sure what the issue was and why this never happened, because we did have a Taylor in the 8-inch line, so I'm not sure if it was a licensing issue or some sort of contractual obligation, but sadly we didn't get a Taylor, and it's a real shame because this is a really very nice line and it's quite comprehensive. The packaging for these figures is fairly straightforward and quite basic. Each box replicates the colour of the uniform or the garb that the ape wears, so in this case we have General Ursus, who was obviously predominantly in purple. We have a nice window display so we can see the figure and all his accessories on show there, and then we have a small image in the left hand corner of the figure himself in profile. The sides of the packaging each has a sort of glyph or an emblem that represents the sort of class of ape that we have, so of course we have the orangutans, the gorillas and the chimpanzees. And when you stack them together like this, they're quite presentable and look quite colourful and quite nice on the shelf. The reverse of the packaging is the same across all the boxes. It is essentially that movie poster or that image that's become very associated with Planet of the Apes in recent years. And there's a little bit of bio about the character, together with images of the other figures in the series. Starting off with Cornelius, we can see that the sculpt is really very strong, and they've done a really nice job of bringing the design to life. Now, the design of the costume is very simplistic, as we see in the film, but NECA have done a very good job of bringing this to life and making it authentic. Now, in terms of the likeness, I think they've done a very good job. I think this is very clearly Cornelius. The course his likeness well. The only thing I have to say about it is I'm a bit surprised that they've gone for this sort of the downturned mouth, that he's got more of the confused or scowling expression on his face, because that's not generally how I tend to think of the character, so I'm surprised they didn't opt to give him a more friendly expression. Now, as I said, the design is very simplistic, so there's not an awful lot of detail for NECA to draw on here for inspiration. I think what we have is nice. There's little details on the cuffs of the sleeve, on the tunic there at the top. And overall, the sculpting is very nice when we look at the ape hands and the feet and things like that. It's well done, and I do like the leather effect on the top of the tunic. It definitely looks like leather, and it's also cast in this rubber mould as well. So the top tunic is a rubber. So the figure has a couple of different textures to it, which is good. For articulation, he does have a ball jointed head, so he can spin his head right the way around there, 360 degrees, which is fantastic, and he's got a fantastic range of motion when it comes to looking up or down, at least when he's looking straight ahead, which is great. He's got ball jointed shoulders, so they go back a good distance. They're a little bit stiff, and you might have to force it a little bit, but the range of motion is there. He does have the peg at the elbow there, which allows him to rotate his elbow at 360 degrees, which is great, and of course it also hinges to 90 degrees. His wrist swivels as well, and he also has a swivel at the waist. He has ball jointed hips, which are neatly disguised by the sculpt, which is quite good, so it's not unsightly, but it is a bit restrictive. He can't really kick his legs out straight out, although he can get them back a little bit, which is good. Again, he's got the same articulation in his knees as he has in his elbow, which is great, and he's got a really generous pivot in the foot. Now, he is very light on accessories. He only basically comes with this scroll. I can't think of what else I would have given him, to be honest. Maybe some archaeological tools or a map or something. But yeah, this is all you get with Cornelius, I'm afraid. Overall, this is a nice figure, and for me was one of the ones I was most looking forward to. It's highly anticipated release for me, but there's something slightly underwhelming about the figure in real life. I'm not sure whether it's a combination of the head sculpt combined with the lack of detail and lack of accessories that just stop him from popping, really. Now, Zira is really significant because not only is she really the second main character in the film, but she's actually the only female ape that we have in this series of figures. So the moulding here is completely original, it's completely unique to this character. So once again, I think NECA have done a really good job of capturing the likeness and the spirit of the character, and yet at the same time I still feel like they've made an odd choice when it comes to the actual expression on the face. There is a sense of incredulity which I think is appropriate, and yet again it doesn't look very friendly. Once again, with Zira, there's not an awful lot of detail, not a lot of things for them to pull out and play with because the outfits are so simple and straightforward. But there are a few extra textures with Zira that we didn't get with Cornelius because they've actually bothered to give her a fabric skirt, which is really kind of cool. Now, the articulation is much the same as Cornelius, at least when it comes to the head. But things get a little bit more tricky when it gets to the arms, because the long sleeves of Zira's gown here really is a hard plastic and it really restricts the articulation. As you can see here, when you try to make the most of that 90-degree joint there, to the hinge to bend it, it doesn't want to have it. So really, you're kind of limited. It does move slightly, but not a lot really. So you're not going to get the most out of that, and there's definitely more resistance around the sleeve as well. Likewise, when it comes to legs, the skirt there, although they've tried to make allowances to, aid the articulation, it doesn't really quite work, and she doesn't have the posability that you get with, say, Cornelius. The best you're going to get really here is out of the feet. Now, Zira comes with a few more accessories than Cornelius. I really like that she comes with this photo frame. I think it's really kind of cool. It's just on card, and it's actually a photo of the two action figures, which I think is kind of cool. So yeah, I like this. I think this is a nice little touch. She also comes with a paper plane. Again, it's probably the cheapest, most easiest accessory ever to put with a character, but definitely appropriate, and it's a nice little extra to have. And thankfully, the mould on her hand allow her to grip these things perfectly, so it's nice and tight there. There's no danger of these things slipping through or anything like that. So they've done a really nice job of the sculpt there, and it looks pretty good, I have to say. Now, funnily enough, I hesitated whether to buy Dr. Zaius or not. He's actually a character that really irritates me in the film, and that is his whole point, of course. But in the end, I did cave, and I got the Series 2 Dr. Zaius, which is the one we're looking at here. The Series 1 has the short jacket, and I much prefer this long, flowing sort of frock coat kind of look. This works a lot better for me, personally. And I have to say, I'm really pleasantly surprised by this guy. For a start, I think the sculpt is vastly superior, and that mainly comes down to the expression, but this definitely looks like Dr. Zaius. I really feel like they've definitely caught the character here. And overall, I think the brightness of his orange outfit is really very appealing, and there's just something about this figure that's actually surprisingly pleasant to have once I got him in the collection, and he's ended up being one of my favourites. Now, just like Zira and Cornelius, there's not a lot of details here, but it is nice that they've caught some of the detailing on the shoulder pads there, which is really cool. And again, on the front of the tunic there. It's a nice little detail, and plus I think the complementary colours here really help this figure to seem a bit more vibrant and a bit more alive. The articulation is pretty much what we've seen before in the other figures here, but everything seems to work really well, and everything in the mould seems to support the articulation, so he has no problems whatsoever, whether it's turning his head, whether it's kicking his arms out, or rotating his arms at the elbow. There's no resistance and nothing hindering the articulation, which is fantastic. And just like the other figures, he also has that swivel at the waist there as well, which, you might be initially worried that, is there going to be any problems here? But thankfully there isn't. And the tunic that he has on is a kind of a soft rubber, so it doesn't hinder whatsoever, which is great. So he can kick his legs out to the side, not so much forwards, admittedly, but he can get him back a good distance as well. And otherwise, no problems. Again, sadly, Dr. Zaius is very light when it comes to accessories. He just comes with his walking stick here, which is pretty decent, and, they've done a nice job of it. But for those looking for a little bit extra, you might want to opt for the Series 1 version, which came with the walking stick and the same scroll that we've seen with Cornelius. But overall, I have to say this is my preferred look, and I love that it's a little bit different to anything else we see in this line. I love having that longer sort of frock coat. Definitely sets him apart. Okay, and on to my favourite in this whole line, which is the General Ursus. I've always loved the look of General Ursus. I love that big, huge cap that he wears at the top there, and his armour just looks really cool. Now, there's a lot more detail here for NECA to pull out, and they've done an absolute fantastic job of making the most of all these little details. The chainmail armour, the little dots on his collar there, and even, obviously, in the boots as well. They've got that leather effect going on, and there's just tons of detail here, which I think they've done, a really fantastic job, and it's nice to see them have the opportunity to do something like this. So yeah, I definitely think they've knocked out the park when it comes to Ursus. And this time, when it comes to the sculpt, I have no qualms whatsoever. This looks pretty much pitch perfect to me. I love everything right down to the nostrils, the extra paint wash that we've got there, so there's different shades of brown and black, and even the detailing on the teeth. Just absolutely fantastic. I love this to bits, and I think, yeah, this is hands down my favourite. The articulation once again is just what we've seen before, but you'll see that there is no hindrance whatsoever when it comes to the head sculpt. Now, you might be worried thinking that leather head cap is actually a hard plastic and he won't be able to turn his head, but actually he's not. It's a very soft rubber and there's no hindrance there whatsoever, which is brilliant stuff. And likewise, there's no hindrance there from the gauntlets or anything else in the shoulders. Everything works really, really well in this figure, so there's no danger there whatsoever of anything not working the way it should. So top marks for that. Now, something I did want to draw attention to, though, is he actually has more articulation in the chest. Now, you can't see it because it's neatly covered by that tunic there, which is a soft rubber, but he can actually move forwards and backwards as well. He's got a little bit of an ab crunch, although I don't think it is a crunch. I think it's more of a ball joint in the upper torso somewhere, allowing him to move a lot more. And again, his ball jointed hips there are very neatly disguised, so they look really good, and still maintaining that articulation, which is just fantastic. So no problems with Ursus whatsoever. He can even kick his legs back a really good distance, which is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, top marks in this figure. He scores highly in all counts. And in terms of the accessories, he's loaded. So he comes with an extra pointing hand, an assault rifle, and a pistol. And he holds his pistol absolutely perfectly there, his finger going through onto the trigger. It looks great and it works perfectly well. What's more, he actually comes with a holster, so you can pop the pistol easily and smoothly into that little holster there, and it holds it really nicely. In fact, the only downside to this figure is that he doesn't really hold the assault rifle very well at all. I could not work out for the life of me how he's supposed to grip this. His fingers don't go through the holes that are there, and it is definitely much more of a squeeze when you're trying to force it in, so I don't think that's been particularly well thought out. Now, in Series 1, they did release a gorilla soldier which had a sort of bandana sash across his chest, but they actually released this 2-pack which was a Toys R Us exclusive of 2 apes, so this is the one I personally opted for. And I think it's interesting that the reverse of the packaging is very different. So although it's the same image, it's actually slightly different. So this is more like what we see in the film. And of course, the colour is vastly different as well. So I personally really like this. I think it's very vibrant. I think it's really colourful. And I love that they've got all the figures at the bottom there. So yeah, top marks for this. Now, in terms of the mould, this is pretty much a re-release of the Series 1 figure, but it is painted slightly differently. I think the purple is a lot brighter, and of course he has a few different accessories that the original didn't come with. He's missing the sash, of course, but instead he has this backpack. And the backpack is one solid plastic piece. It actually looks like it's textured, like as if it's rubber or something, but it's not. And that is a credit to NECA for sculpting it so well and painting it so well that it actually looks more textured than it really is. Now, this 2-pack is aimed at people who really want to army build, which is appropriate given that they are guerrillas soldiers, but they have tried to demark them and differentiate them slightly. So you'll notice there's a slightly different paint job in terms of the head sculpt. So one is a much darker colour, whereas the other one has a more of a lighter brown wash over his face. But that really is the only difference between them. Once again, the articulation is the standard schema that we've seen for the other figures in this line, so he can obviously rotate his head up and down to the sides. There's not much resistance there. He can look up and down a fair distance, which is good. Again, he can kick his arms out there at the shoulder joint, which is brilliant, and he's got that swivel at the elbow as well with the hinge, which is great, and of course the swivel wrists. Now, he can swivel at the waist as well. Sadly, he doesn't have the chest joint, the ball joint in the chest, which allows him to look up and down, sadly, and there's no ab crunch. But he can kick his legs forwards and out, again with that ball joint in the hips, and once more, it's very well disguised. So they've done a really good job of disguising the articulation that's there, so it looks fairly seamless. And yeah, I think they've done a really nice job of him. Each ape is also supplied with an extra fist hand, which allows them to grip things like the baton. But that's not all, because they come with quite a few extras, including a rifle, the assault rifle, a baton each, and one of those poles with a net on for herding humans. Personally, I think these guys were great value for money. You're getting 2 guerrilla soldiers to build your army, they're different enough to be distinctive and interesting, and they come with a whole host of extra goodies, so what more can you ask for? I think if you want to throw in that Series 1 and put them next to Ursus, you've got a really cool looking infantry. Now, that pretty much sums up the line for Planet of the Apes from NECA in the 7-inch scale. Obviously, these are all based on the first film in the series, but the line didn't end there because they did a few special releases, convention exclusives, etc., where they produced a handful of figures from other films like Conquest and Battle for Planet of the Apes. And crucially amongst them, they did do Caesar as well as Aldo. And there were prototypes shown off at various toy fairs of an updated soldier that was coming, but I don't know whether this was ever actually produced. But other than that, that was pretty much all that we saw for this line. So although it was quite a packed line and we got to see quite a lot of characters in this range, it's a shame that it didn't continue to grow and we didn't see some of those crucial characters like Taylor and Nova, which would have been really, really cool to just round out this line. But I do think that what we have is pretty special, and I think particularly the Gorilla Soldiers and the Ursus are really, really wonderful toys. I hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as I will be posting more videos soon.